Gary Gomes, Vedic Astrology, looking into the future. I don't have my standard buffer this week. I have to figure out how to get that on a bit later on. This has been a very sad week because we did have um, an invasion of Ukraine by Russia. I'll talk about that at length. I'll also talk about other issues going on in the world. And in case I'm here at New Bedford Cable News and also on YouTube. I'm sorry, not New Bedford Cable News, excuse me. New Bedford Cable Access and also on YouTube. And I'll be talking about uh, world events as seen through the eyes of astrology. Excuse me. Had kind of a busy morning. Digging myself out of the ice. We had a snowstorm the other day, and it was a challenge getting my car out this morning. All right, so that's enough about me, but I'll tell you more about me. I'm a Vedic astrologer. I've been a Vedic astrologer for a bit over 30 years. I was the president of the Council of Vedic Astrology from 2007 to 2010. I was vice president from 2004 to 2007 when it formed. I was on the board of the American Council of Vedic Astrology, which became the American College of Vedic Astrology, where I still teach. And as you can see, we all kind of keep within the same family. And that's really not by design. It's really because there was such a small group of us at the very beginning. We all sort of tended to cluster together. So it's not an inside job. I don't wish to think that. Anybody can join the Council of Vedic Astrology. As a matter of fact, I'd encourage you to join. They have some excellent teachers there. And I also teach at the American College of Vedic Astrology currently, at Kepler College currently. And I'm working on a book. And I'm also working on developing my own school. And I'm also just a swell guy. No, excuse me. I'm also working on some music channels, and and also some other projects which will come to the fore pretty soon through YouTube. Currently, I have limited facilities with which to record, and that'll be over relatively soon. But when I say relatively soon, it's always a few months down the road. So that having been said, also Reiki master, Swami. Swami is a priest, technically, and of the Kriya Yoga lineage of the Kriya Yoga Temple out of Chicago, Illinois. And doctorate in education, master's in business administration, BA in sociology. I've written, I worked for government for quite a few years, still working, although retired pretty much. And I do readings and classes and consultations. I'm also a Reiki master. And if you want to contact me, my cell phone is probably the best way to get me, 508-525-0001. Or you can contact me directly through neivas@comcast.net or at Gary Gomes, GARYGOMES, @gmail.com. So it's essentially my name with an extra G on the end at Gmail. And let's see, what else do I have to say about myself? I am looking forward to doing more co-host shows with my friends Lolita Donatello Rubach and with other individuals over the next few months. I'm also doing lectures for Septa Rishi Astrology and I've done some for Astrology curriculum, and I've also done lectures for the American College of Vedic Astrology, live and in person. I hope to start doing live and in-person events again really, really soon. And depends on a lot of factors, not just COVID. But hopefully we'll get there, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the flesh, as it were. Okay, so that having been said, I think I've said enough about myself. I am coming up with some music channels. Recently, I sent around Facebook an article about a radio show that I ran with a friend of mine. Actually, I was invited to be a co-host because, in his words, he didn't know anybody who knew more about music. I think that's an exaggeration. There are a lot of people who know more than I do about music, but I do know a lot about music, and I know a lot about really, really unusual bands and really, really unusual instruments and musical traditions. So, but there are a lot of people out there who are far more knowledgeable than I am, and maybe I'll get them on the show too. So a lot of this stuff has to do with access to equipment that I don't have right now, a lot of delays, and also just being in transit between one domicile to another, and that's been going on for almost a year now. So I'm going to get straight to the astrology, and I'm going to try to flash this screen on twice because I have had problems getting it to display the first time. So let me try it once. And I'm going to stop the share and then go back on again. So there's something that's happening with Zoom where the sharing of the screen doesn't always record, and I'm not sure why on this computer. So I'm just going to, just for like a third time. So I looked last week, I looked at Putin's, I didn't look at Putin's chart. I looked at Russia's chart. I looked at the Ukraine's chart. I looked at the United States' chart. And I believe I looked at China's chart. So just to recap. So first of all, let me say first of all, my heart goes out to the people of Ukraine. It's a rotten thing they're encountering. Their pawns basically in a game of international politics, which is much more complicated than what we're seeing on TV right now. And it's always the innocent ones who get hurt, right? So essentially, if you go back to World War I, you can look at the Serbia essentially triggered a war because Archduke Ferdinand was killed, but there were also circumstances leading up to World War I, which were not obvious. Essentially what you had was an agglomeration of colonial powers trying to assert control. Essentially an entanglement of alliances which started back in the 19th century. So a lot of these things. So the initial reaction that we're getting on our media is, well, Putin's power hungry, or Putin wants to regain the former glory of the Soviet Union before it was dismantled. And I think that's a really large part of the equation. This is the guy who was KGB. So this is just a personal observation. This was a guy who was KGB, but I found it fascinating the way that even before the invasion was attacked, we were getting fed. They're about to invade. They're about to invade. They're about to invade. And that may have been based on good intelligence. I'm not saying they were wrong. And we're also getting Putin painted as the next Hitler. And I don't know whether that's true or not, to be honest. I think what he's done is despicable. I don't think it's I don't think it's right. I don't necessarily think it's Hitlerian. Okay. But it's horrible. I mean, he's done a horrible thing. Okay. So I'm not so don't get the wrong idea. Please don't get the wrong idea. But I think one of the things that always comes to mind is what are the economic consequences? And if we look at the map of this from the chart I'm pulling up right now, there's at least from the chart, and I know I'm going to irritate some people with this broadcast. My apologies to you, but yeah, but basically, if we look at the map, the first house lord is in the 8th house, so you can see this is a Gemini rising, and Mercury, Mars, and Saturn are in the 8th house. So again, one of the indications of a Mercury-Mars conjunction is we're being lied to. So that doesn't mean we're being lied to about the coverage or anything like that. But there are things going on behind the scenes, okay, because all these planets are in the 8th house. Venus's aspect on the 1st house does indicate a money interest in this. And we actually have a moon, a 2nd house, and 5th house conjunction in the 7th house. Okay. And it's Venus at a very weak degree. Mars is heading into its exaltation sign. And we have Sun and Jupiter in the 9th house. So basically, there are economic consequences, things like the Nord Pipeline, which are going to play as large factors in this. One of the things that's interesting to me is that the stock market actually went up on Friday, I think it was. And it was mainly because the United States didn't pull out its most powerful weapon, and that was essentially suspending economic, the ability for Russia to trade. So there are sanctions. They got hit with sanctions, but payments can still go back and forth between Russia and the rest of the world. That would be a significant sanction, and they may still take that sanction. But the fact that they haven't, and that there's an ongoing invasion, I think is a signal that they're not, that they'll express shock and horror, but not do much of anything. I hope I'm wrong. Okay. The other thing is, from the chart, if we look at the chart, so the question itself is about Gemini and partnerships and hidden partnerships. So these are in the 8th house. Now, again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just reading the map. I'm just reading the astrological map. If I had done this lecture maybe an hour earlier, it would have shown a different map, but it would have still shown the line combination. So somebody's lying to us. So Putin's lying to us. The U.S. government's lying to us. Take your pick. And I think that essentially from this particular combination, and again, you never get all the details of what are going on in the war. I think we should have learned our lesson from Vietnam and Iraq by now, guys. So 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 essentially, Jupiter's aspecting the first house. That's good. Will the conflict end soon? Probably. Mars is only going to stay in the sign for a couple of months. Rahu is going to change signs in around March 23rd. If we look at Ukraine's map, let's look at Ukraine for a second. Okay. So I'm going to save this map. Well, let me go to Ukraine. Native 2. Okay. And again, I'm going to go out and refurbish this. But it's disheartening to hear that okay, so your government may be lying to you, but that's pretty much it's not a standard issue for governments. I'm not saying that all governments lie, but in this case, we're being subjected to a certain amount of manipulation. So this is the Ukraine chart, and Mars is going over. So Ukraine's right in the middle of a 7.5-year period of Saturn. I think this conflict will largely be over by late April, and some resistance extending into next year, into early next year, but after that, largely gone. So it's one of those things that's really unpleasant and a bit disgusting to talk about because I'm just trying to think of a good way to put it. It's really the people of the Ukraine that are suffering right now. That's really what the problem is. It isn't about whether or not anybody's manipulating anybody else, or a person is power hungry, or a person poses an imminent threat to Europe, which I don't believe. But I do believe, and this chart backs me up, that the truth will come out about this, the whole truth will come out about this. And this is an economics issue. It's not about conquest for land. It's about it's about essentially about an economics issue. And again, we have people being killed for money, which is almost always what wars are about. But it's just damn frustrating. And I made a few predictions saying I didn't think Putin would invade, which, again, any astrologer can be wrong. And I was just really hoping that they wouldn't. But the Soviet, I'm going to be honest with you, I think, not the Soviet, excuse me, I think that, excuse me again, And stop the share and start it again. Get this little guy out of the way. Register. Get that up. I think that Russia was not only deceitful, but also a bit stupid. Um, Hello, I'm in the back of recording right now.
Okay, how long is it going to be?
About another 45 minutes.
Okay.
Fine. Sorry about that. And those are the kinds of spontaneous moments I want to see if I can knock out of these things. But they were not only deceitful, the Mars-Mercury conjunction sort of indicates that. Also, the Russian Federation founding was actually founded on, if we want to go on this birth chart, by this birth chart, the Russian Federation founding was founded on a lie. And that was essentially that the Russians had given up in their interest for expansion and power. We have a Mars Mercury conjunction and a Sun Rahu conjunction in the chart, which is essentially a combination for lying and speaking deceitfully. So shame on us for essentially just putting the stake in the sand and saying, well, that's it, job done. Thanks, Mr. Reagan and Mr. Bush. We don't have to worry about the Russians anymore. It's never, oh gosh, how do I put this without sounding? It's never easy for an empire to give up an empire. The British only did so because Roosevelt insisted they do so, or else he wouldn't help them in ways they wanted to be helped. And you've seen like fits and starts of the British trying to not restarting their empire, but basically exhibiting possessive instincts through the years, like the Falklands War. Okay, so France tried to hold on to French Indochina, etc., etc. So, but Russia had the resources. Russia had the military capability. They never totally did. They never totally disarmed. So essentially, the foundation of the government, and Putin was the second president of Russia. It was interesting because I was looking over his history. He was the president. He was the second president and fourth and fifth president of Russia. So he's essentially been in power for like 12 out of the past 20 years or so. So he's been kind of a dominant force in the country. And this Moon Jupiter conjunction, it's really sort of like a never give up kind of a situation. And Saturn's in the third house, they're patient. So it's a good lesson to learn for the United States in terms of don't expect these guys to go away soon. Don't expect them to give up land soon, because they have two land planets in their first house. And also, don't expect them to not try to build trade relations and become an economic power, which is what they're trying to do right now. China, we helped. China, we actually gave an open door to and said, well, let's see where you can make you as capitalist as us. Now, forget about the democracy part of it. You don't have to be democratic. Um, but Russia, we said, well, you got to be democratic. You got to have elected leadership. You got to have all this other stuff. And I think that was so. So this is. I was just pondering because I got into an argument with somebody about Reagan's foreign policy, and this isn't the time or place for that. But I think the flaw is if you don't give a country a capacity to rebuild, you just let it be taken over by mobsters and by power-hungry people. You'll reap what you sow, and I think that's what we essentially did with Russia. We tried to convert. We converted China to capitalism, and that was a raging success for China. It was a success for us for a while, but now it's coming back to bite us. So let's look at the birth chart for this week. So I just wanted to just make that philosophical statement about Russia. I neither like nor dislike Russia. This is really a good time to reflect on things that the United States has been complicit in, has helped accelerate, has helped enable, because this is around the third time that Putin's grabbed land. Well, while we've had while the U.S. has looked on and imposed sanctions. So I'm not saying we should send military there. I don't want to send military there, but there has to be something more stable and something less in line with our interests. So the first thing that was closed down was the North Pipeline. That was the first thing that was closed down. And so the North Pipeline seems critical to this conversation, and we'll get into why I think it is right now. But basically, like I said, because of the interests of two countries and the way that one of the countries decided to resolve it, people are suffering. So it's just it's just the poor suckers stuck in the middle, unfortunately. And for what? Okay. So let's go over here. So let's look at the world map. And we see Rahu in the 12th house. A lot of spending still going on. Gemini's in the first, Venus and Moon are in the 7th. So some reason for optimism, even though this is kind of a horrible time. But Venus will move into the sign within about a day or so. So there'll be a lot of misery over the next month or so, next month, 2 months, unfortunately. April 1st, you'll see a break. You'll see a resolution of some of these problems. And also, it's interesting that that all these planets will be going into a sign connected with a deposed king. So there's a possibility Ukraine may escape from this unscathed, but it's really only like about a 20% possibility. Not unscathed, but intact, independent. All right, so let's go to the time and space change in the map. So mapping, and we're going to see where the trouble spots are. And we already know where some of them are, obviously. But let's go here. Let's go there. Let's go everywhere. Okay, so we're going to start the share again. All right. All right. So essentially we have okay, so let's go over to Hawaii. Hawaii's encountering some, it looks like, intense governmental action. So is Alaska. The moon is passing over, excuse me. Yeah, the moon is passing over New Mexico. The moon's in the same time with Venus, so the Midwest should actually experience a relatively peaceful period, although some flooding or some high precipitation. Mars is passing over Michigan, close to Ottawa again, so we should expect to see more trouble in Ottawa and in Michigan, and down through Indiana and Illinois, and all the way through eastern Texas. Mercury, there's a Saturn line running through Ohio and Western Pennsylvania and West Virginia and North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida. So essentially that part of the world looks like it's going to be hit strongly by economic circumstances. The United States, there's the sun, and also this what happened in Ukraine also makes the chances of profound inflation and economic slowdown more likely in April. We do have Mercury and Saturn intersecting in Panama and also in Cuba. So Cuba is going to face some problems with its government, some scandals connected with its government. And so is the Dominican Republic and Haiti. There's a sun line going through, and there's a Rahu line going through Western South America, especially near Ecuador. So we should see some economic consequences down there. Saturn Rahu line, and there's a Rahu line going up through Chile, and an ascendant line and a sun line going up through. I'm sorry, an ascending sun line and an ascending Jupiter line going up through South America. So South America actually may get some good news for a change, at least in terms of cures and help for that country's economy. There's a moon line right off the coast of Brazil, so there'll be some changes in government. Doesn't necessarily mean the president will step down, but there'll be some changes in Brazilian government. Interesting, we have a Venus and Mars line running through Iceland. So Iceland's going to be involved in some kind of struggle. So we may see potential for volcanoes again, but I think that'll be largely muted. We have a Rahu line passing through Portugal, northwest Africa, close to Libya. As a matter of fact, going through Libya and Morocco and going through Southwest Africa. So that entire part of the world, we've heard about disease, about epidemics happening in Africa lately, and so that's where the disease center is going to be. There's a Mercury and Saturn line happening in Germany and France and England. So again, this invasion is going to have a big economic impact on Europe. That's not you know, I'm not saying that's the most important thing about it, but it will have a big economic impact on Europe and also on Egypt and Algeria. There's, oh, I'm sorry, also through Libya. Sun and Jupiter are together over Western Europe and Turkey, so that's actually not a bad combination. So the Turkish government may make out okay. We do have the Mars and Venus lines sort of like intersecting in the Ukraine and down to Iran. Iran is getting antsy about this invasion. And there'll be some unrest in Iran because of that. There's a Mercury and Saturn line hitting China and also a Rahu line hitting China and Cambodia, and it looks like Cambodia and Thailand, and also to a lesser extent Indonesia. So all those places will have panics or scares. There may be more disease outbreaks in China. I hope not. But I also think you'll see some kind of there have been demonstrations in Russia. Russia's so again, this line sort of shows that right here. And I know I'm skipping around a lot, and I apologize. And the Chinese will largely come back. They'll be in a better position. The Philippines will be in a better position. Australia will be in a better position. And coming up through here, New Zealand is, what is that line? That looks like it's not a moon line. It looks like a Mars line. So New Zealand is the most unlikely place to have violence or distress, but it looks like there's going to be just a little bit of violence in New Zealand, a little bit more governmental control. So this isn't necessarily a horrific map. Most of the negative activity is occurring over here. I'm going to shut down the screen again just so you can see it, just so I make sure that you can see it. And I hope I'm not taxing your patience. All right. So most of the negative activity looks like it's coming in Hawaii, the upper Midwest, essentially Michigan, Illinois, Indiana. A lot of squabbles, a lot of governmental squabbles in the United States. Okay. That's not surprising. There's that Venus Mars line over Iceland is really interesting. Like I said, it's really kind of weird. So either there's going to be some kind of major dispute in government or some kind of major issue with rights for some people, and economic impact will be very strong over here in Germany, France, England, and also to a certain extent within the United States, but more around here, more around this area, in Texas and going heading north. So yeah, let's see now. And I don't want to leave out Japan because Japan is such an important actor. Japan doesn't have um, a lot of lines going through it. It just has a moon line, so there's some potential for weather-related issues, but not really otherwise. Now, keep in mind, whenever you have a planet like Saturn or Rahu, they tend to cause big issues around the world. And Rahu's changing signs within about, stop the share again, within a month, very shortly, as a matter of fact. And that usually signals some kind of a change. But one of the reasons that I'm saying the Russians are doing something stupid is because K2's passing over their first house. The Ukraine, not blaming the victim, but the Ukraine kind of acted stupidly as well. I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not blaming the victim. It's just something, and also and also we're looking at the current president's chart. The current president kind of acted stupidly. It's just all these malefics like Rahu, Ketu, and Saturn. They become much stronger where when they're near the end of a sign. In Saturn's case, Saturn's very strong right now. It's at 24 degrees. K2's at 2 degrees, 3 minutes, and you say, well, that's not the end of a sign, Gary. Well, actually, it is for K2 because K2 enters a sign at 30 degrees and exits the sign at 0 degrees. So this is where K2 is strongest. And this is where Rahu is strongest. So I'm thinking to myself, there's a lot of background information going on right now. There's a lot of background noise going on right now. And it's not all wonderful stuff. It's not all, it's not all. The Russians are clearly to blame. It's not really, there's not even a shadow of a doubt they're responsible for pulling triggers, so 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 when I say these things, don't get the wrong idea that I'm saying the Russians are doing this to protect themselves. The Russians are innocent. That's bullshit. The Russians know exactly what they're doing. However, there are an international interests at play here, and control of oil is one of the biggest issues on the planet. And Russia doesn't want the Ukraine compromised as a pipeline, a station. The pipeline goes right through Ukraine. And the United States, essentially, for whatever set of reasons, doesn't want a free flow of oil across the world. And again, like I said, I'm not saying the United States causes this is not the idea. But there are definitely elements of Russia which are despicable. And again, I can't in no way, shape, or form might have been in this. But that's the background foundation. All right, so And of course, the innocents get stuck in the middle. But again, clearly Russia was, there's no question as to who the bad guy is. Okay, so don't be, nobody out there say I'm defending Russia. Please, I'll be very offended if you say so. Okay, so from this chart, let's look at so we'll spend a little bit of time on, oh, by the way, if you like what I'm doing, even if you disagree with me, tell me, that's fine. But and if you disagree with my analysis, that's fine as well. I welcome feedback. I can always learn. You're always learning in fields like this. There's always another element to uncover, and I've been doing classes recently, and a lot of interesting things have come up in my analyses which I hadn't quite noticed before. And this has been sort of like a rebirth in my study of astrology. I've always been studying, but this has been sort of a rebirth of my study of astrology. So if you notice things that I miss, that's terrific. We'll learn together. I have been doing it for 30 years. I'm expected to know more than a layman would or a beginner would. But beginners often point out interesting things. So let's look at the individual charts. So if you like what I'm doing, remember to subscribe. I'll always give you kind of a different perspective on things. Subscribe, share it with your friends, and let me know what topics you'd like me to cover. Right now, this is sort of like in my face because of the war. I want it to end as quickly as possible and as peacefully as possible. And I'm hoping the Russians pull back, but I don't see that happening. And I'm just hoping it doesn't turn into a long drawn out conflict. And the birth map doesn't indicate that, but it looks like there'll be pockets of resistance for at least a year if Russia is successful. So let's get back to, subscriptions are very important. And again, you know me, I'm not going to essentially pull any punches. I'm going to tell you what I think. And that's why you either like me or dislike me. All right. So basically, we have for Aries rising, again, it's a bit impatient to get the money in. Rahu gets stronger as it hits low degrees, but also from the chart, and relationship life gets a little bit trickier too because K2 is about to enter the 7th house for the sign, but that's a few weeks away. And Venus and Moon are in the 9th house, so it's actually a good time to make money. Saturn and Mercury, a lot of work. The sign is doing a lot of work. And Jupiter and Sun are in the 11th house. They're getting some recognition from higher ups or important people in society. For Taurus, Taurus has K2 in the 7th house and Venus and Moon in the 8th house. So this sign is feeling a little bit closed in or confined. They'll end within about another day or so. So you'll actually start to feel a little bit more confident, especially within about 2 weeks. And career-wise, Taurus looks fine here. K2 in the 7th house, that'll pass within about a couple of weeks, and a lot of the uncaring nature of a relationship partner will go away. For Gemini, Gemini has Venus and Moon in the 7th house, so it actually likes other people right now. It's doing well to dealing with other people. It'll receive unexpected income over the next couple of days, weeks. And also, in terms of career, in terms of teaching, it's doing extremely well. There are some issues with relationship life and also with communications, which are bothering it. And there is also some fear about security for this sign, but that'll pass within about 2 weeks' time. Cancer has a lot of planets in the seventh house, so there are major communication problems in relationships. Venus and Jupiter are kind of surrounding this house, so they'll maintain relationships, but relationships will be in jeopardy within about 2 months because of Jupiter, because of Mars going into the sign. The other thing is you have K2's in the sixth house, so again, scares about diseases, but no real diseases. And Jupiter and Sun are in the ninth house, so again, Jupiter and Sun are in the eighth house, so I think you'll see a lot of increased financial success for this sign. I apologize, K2's in the fifth house for this one, so you'll see a lot of arguments with kids. Leo has Jupiter and Sun in the seventh house, so essentially that'll make it easier for the sign to communicate with people in positions of power. Mars is in the sixth house with Saturn, so again, they'll have to watch out for diseases. Venus and Moon are in the fifth house, very, very good for financial growth. And last but not least, Rahu's in the 10th house with some fame or recognition career-wise, still goes up. But property looks better for this sign than it has for a while. But it'll still be a couple of months before that gets resolved. Virgo has a bunch of planets in the fifth house, so slow but steady progress. They'll probably have to lie a little bit to get ahead. I hate to say that, and I wouldn't advocate it, but that's what the situation they'll be forced into. Moon and Venus are in the fourth house, so home life actually is pretty happy right now. Lasts for about a day, then it'll get a little bit difficult again. Jupiter and Sun are in the sixth house, so there's a lot of interest in improving oneself. Rahu's in the ninth house, looking for new teachers, new education. Libra has K2 in the second house. Not many people are listening to the sign. Venus and Moon are in the third house. Strong desire for increased reach. And Saturn, Mercury, and Mars are in the third house. So a lot of ambition for the sign. The sign wants power right now. Sun and Jupiter are in the fifth house. With this kind of a combination, essentially, this is really good luck, especially from past efforts. So the individual's been working hard on some kind of project. They'll start to see some results. Rahu's in the eighth house. This feeling of being trapped in or being hemmed in will soon go away. But this sign will be tempted by in relationship matters really strongly over the next year and a half. So married Librans, this is Libra. This is October 15th to November 13th. Be careful about falling into affairs. Scorpio K2's in the first house, Rahu's in the seventh house. So this sign's undertaking a large reassessment of where it's been. That's pretty much what's happening with Russia, Ukraine, and Joe. And Venus is in the second house, so essentially whatever it reaches out to, it'll seem like it's within its grasp, but that'll end within about a week or so. And Jupiter's in the fourth house, along with Sun. That's good for financial growth and career life. Sagittarius has a Venus-Moon conjunction in the first house. Overly sensitive nature for the sign for about one more day, and then Sun, Mars, Mercury will increase financial growth. Jupiter and Sun are in the third house, so a strong desire to advance without hurting anybody. But also a little bit of like unwillingness to take chances. Rahu's in the sixth house. If Rahu's in the sixth house, again, there's still some worry about disease for those who pass. Career-wise, it looks like a good month for the sign. Capricorn has Saturn, Mercury, and Mars in the first house. That's going to make it very domineering, very self-centered. Sun and Jupiter in the second house, it'll be very dictatorial. Rahu's in the fifth house, a lot of desire and ambition. And career-wise, friendship-wise, some problems with financial gains. For Aquarius, Sun and Jupiter in the first house, that's good for a building of new partnerships and new relationships. But we do have all these planets in the 12th house, so it'll be expensive for that sign. And Venus and Moon, new female friends come into this person's life. Ketu's in the 10th. A lot of people won't pay attention what this planet is doing work-wise, and that'll change very shortly. Finally, Pisces has Rahu in the third house, and K2 in the ninth house. So that'll give some conflicts or disagreements with bosses or superiors. Career life, though, is going fairly well for the sign. And expenses will be high, but they'll be spent for self-development and for self-improvement. Saturn, Mars, and Mercury at the same time will give lying friends or friends who want something for nothing. But there'll still be financial gains for this sign this coming week. So that's about it. We're going to keep on watching the headlines and watching what information we're getting fed back from Ukraine. And hopefully it looks like COVID is winding down, as I predicted earlier. Again, it could still come back in the summertime as a minor threat when Saturn goes back into Capricorn in June. So we'll be watching that as well, but I'm tending to think a lot of it's played out. But again, there might be a slight resurgence. The other thing is, I'd like to remind you to subscribe to this site. And I hope I haven't offended anybody by what I've said, but I don't think so. I'm just essentially trying to say that there were reasons why this particular action were taken, and also there were I'm just trying to think of a good way to put it. There were Washington was kind of weird about this entire thing, because they were saying, well, it's an invasion starting, it was just really, really weird. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this particular coverage. So that's kind of made me sit up and take notice. I'll have to go back over the records and see if I saw anything similar. Yeah, I hope it's over quickly for the sake of the Ukrainians, and I hope they keep their country, and I hope that Putin essentially takes a smart pill and backs away. But I don't think that's going to happen. So, and at least, and I'm hoping we avoid a recession, but this kind of makes it more likely. Okay, so let me leave you there. I love you all. God bless you all. Be safe, be kind to each other, and peace. Namaste. Again, Gary Gomes, Vedic Astrology, 508-525-0001, or NEIVAS@comcast.net. Thank you. Good day.